Media and royal commentators frame this as a major reputational crisis for the monarch.
The moment that clip begins, everything you thought you knew about the British monarchy fractures, because this isn't just another royal scandal, this is an all-out internal detonation. A calculated exposure that feels less like a leak and more like a warning shot fired straight from within the palace walls. The name at the center, Prince Andrew. The target, Meghan Markle. And the accusation? Not scandal, not controversy, something far colder, far more deliberate. An economic spy hiding in plain sight. And suddenly, every silence, every smile, every carefully staged appearance starts to feel like part of something much darker. Because if this dossier is even partially true, then the story the world has been fed for years wasn't just incomplete, it was inverted. The document didn't trickle out. It erupted. A confidential file, allegedly sealed, suddenly in public view, tearing through the carefully managed illusion of royal stability. For years, Meghan Markle had been positioned as the outsider, the one pushed out, isolated, suffocated by tradition. But Andrew's claims flipped that narrative with surgical precision. What if she wasn't the victim? What if she was studying the system from the inside, mapping its weaknesses, identifying its financial fault lines long before the wedding bells ever rang? The dossier doesn't suggest coincidence. It suggests timing, strategy, intent, and once you start looking at it that way, the past begins to rearrange itself into something far more unsettling. Late-night movements, restricted areas, a moment at Sandringham that at the time meant nothing. Now, it reads like a scene pulled from a covert operation. The claim is precise: a quiet night, a private phone, and stacks of documents that were never meant to be seen, let alone photographed. Financial records, flight logs, sensitive data tied to Andrew's past roles details that could expose not just personal vulnerability, but institutional fragility. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because if someone had access, real access, not symbolic but physical, then the question isn't just what was taken, it's how easily it was taken. And who knew? Because Andrew didn't keep it to himself. The moment he allegedly discovered what was happening, the information moved upward straight to the Queen. And what followed wasn't public outrage. It was silence. Controlled, deliberate silence. No investigation. No confrontation. Just immediate internal lockdown. Locks changed. Surveillance tightened. Movements watched more closely than ever before. And that kind of response doesn't scream confusion. It whispers confirmation. Something had happened. Something serious enough that exposure would have been catastrophic. So instead of explosion, the palace chose containment. But containment has consequences. Pressure builds, and eventually something gives. Exactly 1 year later, Harry and Meghan leave. Officially, it was about freedom, about independence, about escaping a system that felt too rigid, too restrictive. But look at the timing again. Look at the shift in atmosphere described in the dossier: tightened control, restricted movement, constant monitoring. Was it suffocation or supervision? And if it was supervision, what were they afraid would happen next? Because departures aren't always escapes. Sometimes they're strategic retreats. And just when the story feels like it's settling into one direction, it snaps the other way. Meghan doesn't stay silent. She steps forward confident, composed, and absolutely relentless. Every accusation? Denied, not softened, not reframed, denied with precision and force. But then she does something even more explosive. She doesn't just defend herself, she attacks. Not Andrew, not the system. The Queen herself. And suddenly, the conflict isn't about documents or allegations anymore. It becomes something far more dangerous: legacy versus narrative. Because once those words are spoken publicly, once the image of the monarchy's most untouchable figure is challenged on a global stage, there's no quiet resolution left. There's only escalation. And escalation is exactly what arrives in the form of Princess Anne. Not a press statement, not a carefully worded briefing. A direct message. Cold, final, unfiltered, a warning that doesn't negotiate. It draws a line. And when someone like Anne draws a line, it's not symbolic. It's structural. It defines what happens next. But here's the part that doesn't sit comfortably. Because while the world focuses on the clash Andrew's accusations, Meghan's counterattack, Anne's warning, there's something else unfolding underneath. Patterns, timing, reactions that feel just a fraction too fast, too coordinated. Almost like different pieces of the same machine suddenly moving at once. And that raises a question no one wants to ask out loud. Was this chaos or was this exposure? Because when a system begins to fracture, it doesn't always collapse immediately. Sometimes it reveals itself first. dispersed, slowly, reluctantly, in fragments that don't make sense until they suddenly do. And right now, those fragments are starting to align in ways that feel anything but accidental. And just when it seems like the storm has reached its peak, something shifts again. Because Andrew doesn't stop. He escalates. More evidence, more claims, more pressure. And this time, it doesn't just stay within media speculation, it crosses into something far more dangerous legal territory. Investigations, authorities stepping in, the kind of attention that doesn't fade with headlines. And suddenly, the man who started the fire is standing directly in its path. Because when secrets are dragged into the light, they don't always land where you expect. Sometimes they circle back. And when they do, they don't just expose others, they expose everything. And just when it feels like the entire structure is about to stabilize, it fractures even further. Because the moment legal authorities step in, the narrative stops being controlled by the palace, by Meghan, or even by Andrew himself. It becomes something colder, something procedural, something that doesn't care about image or legacy. The investigation begins quietly, but its implications echo loudly. Financial records, flight logs, historical income streams. Suddenly, the same documents that were allegedly used as leverage are now being dissected under a microscope. And the most dangerous twist? They don't just point outward, they point back. Because Andrew, the man who ignited this entire chain reaction, finds himself pulled directly into the consequences of his own exposure. Allegations of financial misconduct, abuse of position, corruption, terms that don't belong in gossip headlines anymore, but in legal documents. And the timing? Almost poetic in its cruelty. His arrest, reportedly on his own birthday, doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels like a message, a signal that whatever game was being played behind closed doors has officially spilled into a space where control no longer exists. And suddenly, the question changes again. Was Andrew exposing Meghan or unknowingly exposing himself? But across the Atlantic, there's no hesitation. Meghan doesn't retreat. She pivots. Fast, precise, strategic. While Andrew faces a tightening legal net, she steps forward with something far sharper than denial mockery, dismissing the dossier as paranoia, framing the accusations as desperate deflection from a man clinging to fading relevance. And it lands. Because public perception isn't just shaped by facts, it's shaped by timing. And in that moment, Andrew looks vulnerable, cornered, almost exactly the position he once tried to force her into. And that inversion, it changes everything. But Meghan doesn't stop there, because denial isn't enough when the stakes are this high. She escalates. An ultimatum delivered not quietly but publicly with calculated precision. Withdraw the accusations or face something far worse. New evidence, videos, messages, claims that reach deeper into the monarchy itself, suggesting knowledge, complicity, secrets that were never meant to be seen. And suddenly, the palace isn't just defending its reputation, it's defending its silence. Because if even a fraction of that threat is real, then this isn't a scandal anymore. It's exposure on a scale the monarchy cannot afford. And that's exactly when Princess Anne steps in again, but this time, not with a private warning, with a public stance. Firm, unyielding, drawing a line not just against Meghan, but against the very idea of negotiating with pressure. Her words don't soften the situation, they harden it. Because once you label something as coercion, as manipulation, as a direct attack on the institution, you're no longer in a disagreement, you're in a standoff. And standoffs don't end quietly. Then comes the moment that shifts everything again. Not a royal voice, not a legal authority, someone from the shadows, a former staff member. And suddenly, the story isn't being told from the top down, it's coming from the inside out. An audio recording surfaces. And this is where the tension tightens to its breaking point. Because audio doesn't argue, it doesn't interpret, it plays. A voice, allegedly Meghan's, giving instructions that feel chillingly direct. Access the file, photograph the records, use it as insurance. And in that instant, every denial she made collides head-on with something that feels disturbingly tangible. And the reaction is immediate. Brutal, public opinion shifts, not gradually, but violently. Because people don't just react to evidence, they react to perceived intent. And if that recording is real, if even part of it holds, then the narrative doesn't just flip again. It collapses. The image of victimhood, of resistance, of survival at all starts to disintegrate under the weight of something far more calculated. And while Meghan faces that collapse, the palace doesn't hesitate. Emergency meetings, legal strategies, decisions that aren't about optics anymore, they're about containment, protection, finality. But in the middle of all this noise, all this chaos, one detail becomes impossible to ignore. Andrew goes silent. Completely no defense, no follow-up, no attempt to reclaim control of the narrative he started. And that silence doesn't feel like strategy. It feels like acceptance. As if the cost of this war his freedom, his reputation was already understood long before the first document ever surfaced. And that raises the most uncomfortable question of all. If he knew what he risked, why start it? Because now when you step back and look at the entire chain of events, the leak, the accusations, the counterattacks, the investigation, the arrest, the recording it doesn't feel random. It feels structured, like pieces moving into place, like something that was always heading toward this exact outcome. And if that's true, then this wasn't just a battle between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. It was something far bigger, a system under pressure, a structure being tested, maybe even reset. And yet, despite everything that's been exposed, everything that's been said, everything that's been lost, one thing remains unresolved. Who actually holds the final piece of this puzzle? Because if there are still documents unreleased, recordings unheard, truths still buried beneath layers of silence, then this story isn't over, not even close. And the most dangerous part, the next move won't just reveal more secrets. It might reveal who was really in control the entire time.